A storm raged across the ruins of New Berlin. 9. A dying world where humanity's remnants clung to survival. The once thriving colony, reduced to crumbling buildings and rusted-out vehicles, sat beneath an eternal shroud of storm clouds. Rain fell in sharp, relentless sheets, washing filth into the gutters and carving trail through the dirt-laden streets. In the distance, the flickering remnants of power grids cast a sickly glow over the skeletal remains of what had once been a bustling city. Within the hollowed-out husk of an old municipal building stood the shelter. The place had long since fallen into neglect, its metal walls stained with rust, its artificial lighting dim and sputtering. A handful of outdated synthetic caretakers shuffled through the corridors, their servos whining as they carried out pre-programmed tasks with the mechanical patience of things that did not know the passage of time. Caged within the deepest part of the shelter, unmoving, was Argus. 17 years of service had left the German shepherd scarred and tired. Once, he had been a war dog, trained for search and destroy missions, for detecting explosives and hunting enemies in the blackness of war-ravaged colonies. Now, he was just another discarded thing, left behind when his human partner had died on the battlefield. He no longer reacted when people passed his cage. The other dogs barked, some whined, others pawed desperately at the metal bars, begging for an escape from this forgotten place. But Argus remained still, his large, grizzled body curled against the cold floor. His breath was slow, his ears barely twitched at the distant hum of approaching voices. He had learned that hope was a lie. Then she arrived. The door creaked open, and small footsteps echoed through the hall. The air shifted, not just from the change in pressure, but something deeper, something Argus could not name. He did not lift his head at first, not until he heard the voice. "Mom, look at him." A child. He did not understand why that particular voice pulled him from his haze, but it did. His ears flicked, his eyes, dull and faded from years of waiting, barely focused as he looked up. She was tiny, too small for this world, too fragile to belong in a place that had been broken by war. She had a shock of dark curls, damp from the rain, clinging to her forehead. Wide, curious eyes framed by thick lashes studied him through the bars. She knelt before his cage, fingers curling around the rusted metal, and for the first time in years, Argus felt something stir in his chest. "Sweetheart," a woman's voice, firm, protective, spoke behind her. "He's too old. There are younger dogs that need homes." "He's not old," the girl insisted, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's waiting." Argus held her gaze. The certainty in her voice made something shift inside him. She didn't see a relic. She didn't see a lost cause. She saw him. The woman, Captain Selene Vaughn, studied the dog warily. She had the look of someone who had seen too much and trusted too little. Her military fatigues were worn but well kept, her movements efficient. She crouched beside her daughter, peering at the German shepherd with the sharp eye of a soldier. She could see what he was, an old war dog, past his prime, likely broken inside. But Elara, her 7-year-old daughter, didn't waver. "He's been alone too long," she said softly. Selene exhaled, rubbing a tired hand down her face. "He's 17, baby. He won't be around for long." Elara pressed her forehead against the bars, unfazed. "Then we'll love him for as long as he stays." Something in Selene's expression tightened, something old and buried, something that recognized loss too well. She had seen soldiers with that same vacant stare, the ones who had survived too many battles only to be left behind. She sighed, rubbing at the ache between her brows. A synthetic caretaker, its voice a mechanical rasp, shuffled closer. Subject designation: Argus. Former military K9, 3rd Battalion, Special Reconnaissance. Declared inactive following the fall of Hadrian. 4. Selene's jaw tensed. She knew that battle. Hadrian. 4 had been a massacre. Behavioral status? She asked, keeping her voice even. Minimal aggression. No reported incidents. Subject shows symptoms of psychological withdrawal, unlikely to display further response. Selene glanced at the dog again. He wasn't growling, wasn't reacting with fear or hostility. He was just waiting. Elara turned to her mother, her expression unyielding. Please. Selene had fought wars. She had killed to protect humanity's last strongholds. She had made choices that had cost lives and saved others. And yet, looking into her daughter's wide, pleading eyes, she found herself facing a battle she could not win. She exhaled sharply. Fine, but you're responsible for him. Elara's face lit up, and Argus, though he did not move, felt something unfamiliar crack through the fog in his mind. Hope. The journey back through the city was bleak. The rain had lessened to a steady drizzle, pooling in the cracks of shattered pavement. The streets, once filled with traders and engineers desperately trying to keep the colony functional, were nearly empty. Word had spread. Xelthari forces had been sighted in the outer sectors. The war wasn't over, and everyone knew what was coming. Selene led the way through the shadows, her rifle slung across her back. She had no intention of being caught off guard. Argus walked beside Elara, his movements slow but steady. He could still feel the weight of age pressing down on his bones, but something about the child's presence dulled the ache. She hummed as they walked, a quiet, tuneless melody. Every few steps, she would glance at him, as if making sure he was still there. You were a soldier, she said eventually, her voice carrying over the damp air. Argus did not answer, but he did not look away. I think you were a hero, she added after a moment. Heroes died on battlefields. Heroes were remembered. Argus had been neither, but as the girl smiled at him, the storm briefly parting above them, he wondered if, just maybe, he had been wrong. The shelter's stale air had been replaced by something new, something warm. The scent of home, the quiet hum of a living place. The walls of their small dwelling were lined with reinforced plating, a leftover precaution from years of war. The floors creaked beneath footsteps, and dim emergency lighting flickered overhead, barely keeping the shadows at bay. It wasn't much, but it was safer than the ruins outside. Argus lay curled on a blanket in the corner, eyes half-lidded as he listened. He had spent the first 2 days simply watching, observing, adjusting. Elara was careful around him, never pushing, never demanding more than he was willing to give. She would sit nearby, speaking in soft tones about things he didn't understand, stories of stars, of places she had never seen but dreamed of visiting. Selene, on the other hand, was harder to read. She watched him as much as he watched her, weighing his every movement, analyzing his every breath. She had the eyes of a soldier, someone who had been betrayed by hope before and wasn't willing to trust it easily. On the third night, Argus moved closer. Elara had fallen asleep on the floor beside him, her small fingers barely brushing his paw. The warmth of her presence seeped into his old bones, loosening something that had been wound tight for years. He let out a slow breath and closed his eyes. The nightmares came anyway. Flashes of war, explosions ripping through metal corridors, the scent of burning flesh, the high-pitched whine of drones overhead. He saw his handler again, Corporal Reese Carter, his voice sharp, commanding, filled with certainty even as the sky fell apart above them. Then came the silence. The moment Reese had stopped breathing, Argus' eyes snapped open, his body tensed. The room was dark, the only movement the slow rise and fall of Elara's breath. For a moment, the echoes of the past still rang in his ears. Then he felt it. Something outside. His ears flicked, his body shifting upright with precision that had not dulled with age. A scent drifted through the cracks in the walls. Something sharp, something wrong. His lips curled back slightly, exposing old but still lethal fangs. Then the doorknob rattled. Argus was on his feet before thought fully formed. a low growl curling from his throat. Selene was already awake. In one swift motion, she reached for the rifle resting against the table, body tense, muscles coiled. Argus watched as she moved, quick and calculated. She had been a soldier long before she had been a mother. The door creaked. A shadow shifted outside the window. Not human. Selene didn't hesitate. She moved to Elara, shielding the child with her body while leveling her weapon at the entrance. "Argus," she whispered. "What do you see?" He moved to the window, nostrils flaring. The scent was all wrong. Metal and exoskeleton. Not like the synthetic caretakers from the shelter. No, this was something else. Something that didn't belong here. Then he saw it. A figure just beyond the glass. Tall, hunched, too many limbs. Eyes that pulsed with dim, unnatural light. The scent of old blood. Xelthari. The war had come to New Berlin 9. The moment stretched. Then the thing moved. Selene fired. The window shattered. The creature screeched, a sound that sent a shock wave of primal recognition through Argus' mind. He had fought them before. He had torn through their ranks. He would do it again. Without hesitation, he launched forward, barreling through the remnants of the glass, the pain barely registering as shards bit into his fur. He hit the ground running, muscles igniting with an energy he had not felt in years. The Xelthari scout twisted toward him, mandibles clicking, claws raised. It did not expect resistance. Argus struck like lightning. His teeth found flesh, if it could be called that, his jaw locking down with unrelenting force. The creature shrieked, staggering back, its exoskeleton cracking beneath the pressure. The taste of something acrid and metallic filled Argus' mouth, but he did not let go. Selene was already moving, stepping out onto the street, her rifle steady, her stance unshaken. She fired twice, once into the Xelthari's shoulder, once into its throat. The thing gurgled. Then it stopped moving. Argus released his grip, panting, blood dripping from his muzzle. For a moment, silence hung between them. Then Selene looked down at him, something unreadable in her expression. "You didn't hesitate," she said. It wasn't a question. Argus met her gaze. Neither had she. Elara appeared in the doorway, wide-eyed but unafraid. She had woken up, but she had not screamed. She had not run. She had watched, and now she stepped forward, placing a small hand on Argus' back. "You're still a soldier," she murmured. Selene exhaled sharply, scanning the shadows beyond the street. The Xelthari never sent scouts alone. "We need to move," she muttered. Argus understood before she even said it. He could feel it. The storm had arrived. The night had become a hunting ground. Selene led the way through the rain-slicked streets, her rifle steady, her eyes constantly scanning the shadows. Elara clung to Argus' side, her small hand gripping the thick fur along his back. He could feel her heartbeat, fast but steady. Fear was there, but it had not consumed her. She trusted him to keep her safe. The colony had not yet realized the danger. A few distant voices echoed through the alleys, the occasional flicker of movement from those still awake, but no sirens, no alarms. No one knew that death had already arrived. Argus did. The scent of Xelthari lingered in the air, bitter, acrid, layered with the stench of something ancient and patient. They were hunting. The first scout had been a test, a whisper of what was coming. And now the real assault would begin. Selene stopped at an intersection, pressing her back against the wall. Rain dripped from her hood, her jaw clenched in grim calculation. She spoke in a voice barely above a breath. "They'll target the power grid first. The colony won't even know they're under attack until it's too late." Elara's voice was small but certain. "Then we have to warn them." Selene hesitated. Argus could sense it, the weighing of risk, the quick assessment of their chances. He recognized the battlefield logic. She had fought wars before. She knew what happened to those caught in the first wave of an invasion. Argus stepped forward, ears perked, nose twitching. A sound reached him, light deliberate footsteps over metal. His muscles tensed. Selene caught the shift in his posture immediately. "Move," she ordered. The three of them darted across the intersection, just as a figure dropped from the rooftops behind them. The Xelthari warrior landed in a crouch, its elongated limbs unfolding in a series of unnatural movements. It wasn't alone. Two more emerged from the alleyways, their eyeless faces scanning, their bodies covered in segmented armor. One carried a blade-like appendage, serrated and pulsing with bioelectric energy. Another flexed clawed fingers, clicking its mandibles in anticipation. They had been waiting. Argus growled, stepping in front of Elara. Selene raised her rifle, but before she could fire, the first Xelthari lunged. Argus met at midair. The impact sent them both rolling across the wet pavement. Claws scraped against his flank, cutting deep, but he ignored the pain. His teeth found the creature's arm, biting down with the full strength of 17 years of training in war. The Xelthari shrieked, its exoskeleton cracking beneath his jaws. Selene fired. The second creature jerked backward as a round punched through its carapace, dark ichor spraying onto the walls. But the third was fast, too fast. It closed the distance in seconds, its blade swinging. Selene dodged, barely, the edge of the weapon slicing through the fabric of her sleeve. She countered with a shot to the creature's knee joint, forcing it to stumble. "Elara, run!" she shouted. Elara didn't run. Instead, she did something neither of them expected. She moved toward the fallen Xelthari that Argus had crippled, her hands steady despite the fear in her eyes. One of its discarded weapons, a small, pulsing energy blade, lay inches from its twitching limb. Argus saw what she intended a second before she acted. "Elara, no." Selene turned, but she was too late. The girl snatched up the weapon, turned, and in one swift motion, drove it into the Xelthari's throat. The creature spasmed, then stilled. For a heartbeat, there was only silence. Elara's hands trembled as she let go of the weapon. The glow of the blade faded, leaving only the cold, lifeless body beneath her. Selene stared, her breath uneven. Argus watched her, waiting for the reprimand, the fear, the anger. But none came. Instead, Selene lowered her rifle. Her expression was unreadable. Elara's voice was barely above a whisper. "I did what I had to." She was 7 years old, and she had just made her first kill. Argus stepped closer, pressing his head gently against her side. She curled her fingers into his fur, gripping tightly, grounding herself in the warmth of something still alive. Selene turned away first. There was no time for grief, no time to process what had just happened. The Xelthari would return, and next time, they wouldn't come in small numbers. She exhaled sharply, resetting her stance. "We need to get to the command post. Now." Argus stayed close as they moved, his wounds aching but irrelevant. He could feel it coming, the weight of the next battle, the storm that had not yet fully broken. The war was here, and there would be no turning back. The city was dying. Argus could hear it in the distant thunder of explosions, in the metallic shriek of collapsing structures, in the panicked cries of those too slow to escape. Smoke curled into the storm-heavy sky, turning the colony's artificial glow into a sickly haze. Selene led them through the back alleys, her rifle tight in her grip, her pace swift but controlled. She knew exactly where she was going. The command post was the only place left with real defenses, the last stronghold before the colony fell completely. Argus limped but kept moving, his flank burning where the Xelthari had cut him. He ignored it. Pain was nothing. Elara stayed close, her small fingers still gripping his fur. She had not spoken since she had taken the Xelthari's life. She had not cried. Selene glanced back at her daughter, something flickering behind her eyes, but she said nothing. There was no time for softness. Not yet. The streets ahead were littered with bodies, human and Xelthari alike. Some were still burning. Selene barely spared them a glance. She stepped over them with a soldier's efficiency, leading them toward the old bunker doors at the city's edge. Then the ground shook. Argus froze. His ears pricked. Something massive was coming. Selene heard it too. She spun, scanning the rooftops, the streets, the distant wreckage. The Xelthari had stopped hunting from the shadows. They no longer needed stealth. They were here to finish what they had started. A shape loomed in the smoke, four-legged, towering, its exoskeleton a twisted amalgamation of organic plating and mechanical augmentation. Its eyes burned like dying embers, and beneath its monstrous form, the ground blackened with the remnants of bioelectric discharge. A war beast. Argus had seen them before, had watched them tear through human battalions like insects beneath a boot. The colony's defenses had never been built to withstand something like this. Selene cursed under her breath. She pulled Elara behind her, raising her rifle, but they all knew the truth. Bullets wouldn't stop this thing. It took a step forward. The pavement cracked beneath its weight. The deep, reverberating hum of its internal energy core vibrated through the air. Selene fired first. The shot struck its armored face and ricocheted off harmlessly. The beast did not slow. Argus moved before he had time to think. His body was failing him. He could feel it. The years, the wounds, the exhaustion, all pulling at him like unseen chains. But it did not matter. He lunged, weaving between the rubble, closing the distance before the creature could react. It turned, slow but deliberate, its maw splitting open with a wet, mechanical hiss. Argus didn't give it the chance to strike. He leapt, jaws snapping onto the exposed seam between its neck plating and its core. The war beast roared. It twisted violently, trying to shake him off, but he held on. He ignored the searing pain in his ribs, the blood slicking his fur, the sound of his own bones grinding under the strain. Selene saw the opening. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed Elara's hand, pulling her toward the nearest collapsed structure. "Stay here," she ordered, then turned and sprinted toward the fight. She was fast, but not fast enough. The beast slammed its massive clawed limb into the ground, sending a shockwave through the street. The force sent Selene flying. She hit the pavement hard, skidding against the rubble. Her rifle clattered from her grip. Argus lost his hold. He tumbled, hitting the ground in a heap of aching limbs. His breath came in ragged gasps. The beast loomed over Selene now, its molten gaze locking onto her fallen form. It raised its limb to crush her. Elara moved. She shouldn't have. Selene had told her to stay back, to hide. But Argus saw it in her eyes. The same fire, the same certainty that had driven her to pick up that Xelthari blade. She ran straight toward the wreckage. Argus pushed himself up, pain screaming through every nerve, but he couldn't stop her. Elara leapt. The war beast was focused on Selene. It didn't see her until she was already there, scrambling up its armored leg, using the exposed plating as handholds. Selene's eyes widened in horror. "Elara, no." The girl ripped the energy blade from the corpse she had killed earlier and plunged it straight into the beast's core. The sound it made was not of this world. The light in its eyes flickered, sputtered. The energy discharged beneath its skin faltered. Argus lunged again, one final time, teeth finding the open wound Elara had created. He bit down with everything he had left. The war beast convulsed. Then it collapsed. The impact shook the street. Smoke and dust exploded into the air. Argus felt himself falling, but before he hit the ground, something small and warm wrapped around him. Elara. She was crying. Selene was there a second later, pulling them both into her arms, holding them as tightly as she could. Her breath was ragged, her face streaked with something that looked too much like pain. Argus felt the warmth of them both, the weight of their presence, and knew this was what he had been waiting for. The colony would survive. The war wasn't over, but they had won this battle. Selene pressed her forehead against Elara's. You stupid, reckless, brave little thing. Her voice cracked. Elara sniffled. We had a win. Selene looked at Argus, her expression unreadable for a long moment. Then she placed a hand on his scarred head. You brought us home. Argus exhaled. His body was broken, but he didn't care. He had found his pack again. He had found his purpose. And for the first time in years, he was not alone.